really, really hard, and they execute the system, and that's what it's all about.
Yes, sir.
Trust.
He's pretty
Big trust. Big trust, baby.
Hey, yes, sir.
Right on cue. Hey, right on cue. Hey, let me.
We are back on the Jumbo Set podcast presented by Jimmy's Famous Seafood. It is Wednesday night, March 12th, 2025. My name is Jake Louque, and I'm joined by Benjamin Franklin here to break down the latest in Ravens free agency news, of which we have a lot to get to. This might be our first significantly news-heavy show, at least a palatable news-heavy show in the last, month or maybe even longer than that. But first of all, how's it going, pal?
Going well. Golf. Players tomorrow, the fifth major got
Disrespect to the John Deere Classic, by the way. I'm not going to let that.
So cucked by Colin Morikawa this weekend. I can't even put into words how bad that was. While I was golfing, I looked at my phone. It's like, oh, cool, 3-shot lead. What could go wrong? Sure enough, there's a cool. I boosted I got him 40-1 with a 100% boost on Caesars, and it let me do $25 on it. It was like 25 to win 900, and just see ya at the end there when I was finishing up my round. I was like, oh, cool. We got an eagle from Russell Henley. Good for Russell Henley, but that going on, I'm just ready for him. Ready for golf season. That's all.
Great job by NBC to catch that shot when it was still in progress, and as it's rattling into the hole, I thought I was missed it somehow, and I was like, oh no, they just fucked it up, and they missed it. So. Yeah, awesome stuff there. I don't know if you saw Colin today. He was looping at Sawgrass, and his caddy, JJ, dunked it on 17 for an ace. Exciting stuff.
Very exciting stuff. Rory wilding out. All fun things going on in that realm. But yeah, that's just like NBC's coverage and the golf coverage of the commercials. That's just like there's this whole thing. There's a whole thing on Twitter. Like, what is the American culture? Like, what are we like? There's the whole Jubilee debates, like political stuff going on. It's like, what is our culture? I'll tell you what our culture is. Our culture is consume. We are consumers of corporate media and corporate entities and goods and services. We are Amazon, Walmart, fucking Hulu.
Boner and heart pills in the case of golf broadcasts.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. So that it just goes to show, like we're getting to such a, maybe I'm an old man now, pushing 32 upcoming here, but it's just, what is our culture? Our culture is corporate, sterile consumption. That is what it is. It is not Western European, Christian, Anglo-Saxon, or melt. Like, what is our culture? Our culture is corporate. Our culture is capitalist, post-capitalist, fucking corporate socialism. Like, that is our culture. So that's where I'm at. That's something that's been bothering me. That Russell Henley shot bothered me. Southwest is bothering me. All those things are bothering me. So I'm happy it's golf season, but man, this rant on consumerism presented by
the way, get your tickets to the Tailgate to opening day coming up in a couple of weeks here. Still plenty of time. Consume
alcohol at opening day. There you go. Consume Captain Morgan spiced rum.
Hey, to their credit, we're getting normal sized beers for what seem like affordable prices. We'll see what, sales tax and whatever else, admin fees they can levy on top of that at Camden Yards this year. But I am encouraged by some of the steps they're purporting to take.
I don't understand. All right. Were the beers expensive? Yes. They're also double beers.
Which I don't like. I just want a regular sized beer for a regular.
I understand that, but the price, yeah, I get it gets warm and stuff, but the price is like it's two beers, so it's like, all right, beer and 3/4. The prices weren't that crazy, but beer gets warm. So there we go. That's how I'm feeling. Excited for golf. Sick of corporate consumerism. And speaking of which, the NFL has no part in that, right? That I love so much. The NFL has no part of that, right? That's free. We're here to talk free agency, consume NFL content.
Yeah, I mean, we had a car show going on, at a certain address on Pennsylvania Avenue earlier today. I mean, like, if that doesn't tell you how far gone we are at this point, I mean, not even like really trying to stoke the fires there or anything. It's just kind of what a spectacle it is at this point.
It's not even anything like political. It is what our society has shifted to, right? Like, corporations are what control. So I don't know. It's just been a topic on my mind throughout this week. So there's my beginning rant to start the show here.
You're getting a little Bill Burr on me there. You seem to be
sure.
Some rabid dogs that might need to be curtailed.
Some rabid dogs. Speaking of rabid dogs, the Ravens here losing a couple rabid dogs, I'd say, and maybe gaining an older rabid dog.
Yeah, certainly. Retaining a few rabid dogs as well. Top of the run sheet here, of course, Ronnie Stanley and the Ravens have agreed to a 3-year, $60 million contract extension, $44 million guaranteed. Something that I think had been floating around. On our last episode, we had reported, or we hadn't reported, we had thrown it out there that Pretty Ricky as well as Cole Jackson, maybe they shared their byline there together, that the Ravens and Ronnie Stanley have been nearing an extension of this type. Finally comes to fruition a few days ago. So the guru is back. Ronnie is back. Very good stuff for an offensive line that needs this stability. I think good for Ronnie Stanley to get this payday after a very difficult several years there with that injury in 2020, all that he had to go through to come back from. I'm very excited about this move. I know you are as well. And yeah, I mean, he was a hot item on the free agent market. It had already kind of been floated out there that the Chiefs were going to pursue him. I think a funny tweet from my guy, Bill Simmons, who is just one of the most out of touch NFL fans of all time, who just went through 25 years of Patriots dynastic, things going on and can't contemplate the fact that players might not want to sign with bad teams in free agency. But it actually sounds like that might have come to fruition, because part of what's come out recently, I think this just came out today, that Sports Illustrated, I think it was Burt Breer, is reporting that the Chiefs and the Commanders actually did tamper with Ronnie Stanley. Chiefs offering him $20 million per year, Commanders offering $24 million per year. So a hot ticket. Good for him that his name was out there like that, but I think it's best for everyone that he winds back in Baltimore, a richer man and probably ready to retire in purple.
Certainly. Let's go through the whole run sheet. Let's go back and hit him. Let's spit him out and go back and get on him.
Lead the way.
All right. So Ronnie Stanley, 3-year, $20 million, $44 million guaranteed. Ravens retain 5-time Pro Bowler and 1-time All-Pro Patrick Ricard on a 1-year contract worth up to $2.9 million. They use a veteran, can't remember the exact name of it. It's like veteran with the same team bonus thing where they only get hit for vested veteran with the same team. So they have a $1.45 million cap hit there. Awesome. The Ravens signed Deandre Hopkins to a 1-year, $5 million year deal with up to $6 million achievable. The Ravens also released Arthur Maulet and Marcus Williams. Brandon Stevens signs a 3-year, $36 million deal with the New York Football Jets. Michael Pierce retires after 9 NFL seasons, most spent with the Ravens. And Malik Harrison signs a 2-year, $10 million deal with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And that is where the Ravens are as of Wednesday, March 12th at 5:50 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Coming across the wire, got a tweet here from Brian McFarland. Per the NFL's official free agency release, the Ravens tender safety Ardarius Washington with the RFA tender of $3.453 million. If Washington signs an offer sheet with another team, the Ravens can match. If they don't match, there is no draft pick compensation. Interesting.
Yeah, I know that they were working to achieve a deal with Ardarius Washington, a multi-year deal, but I guess, ran out of time there. So the Ravens will have an opportunity to match any offer sheet that he gets. So I don't know. Interesting scenario there. Interesting scenario. I would love to offer him something if I'm a NFL team. He was a stud. He was a hitter. He made impact plays. So interesting scenario there. But yeah, a good bit of traction. Basically, at this point, the Ravens are minus Stevens, who really struggled last year, minus Marcus Williams, who really struggled last year. We also missed Patrick McCarry, signs with the Jaguars. I think a similar 3-year deal with somewhere around $30 million. Also, McCarry, who was all right, versatile, led them in penalties, struggled a lot last year. Yeah, they're running it back, man. I mean, I'd say the biggest loss they've had so far is Michael Pierce, to be frank. The Michael Pierce was a disruptive nose tackle, nose guard, meatball, and had a fun interception to pretty much kind of his last highlight of his career, and a fun player that was good and was able to spell with Travis Jones and some of the Ravens' other interior linemen and be disruptive. But other than that, Chris Board, another one we missed. Chris Board signed a deal elsewhere, I think like a 2-year, $8 million deal, something like that. So Tylan Wallace still floating out there. So no major subtractions at this point to me, other than really kind of, and I still wouldn't really call Michael Pierce major necessarily, but with 11 draft picks and considering the Ravens are going to sign someone else, they have not lost much moving into the draft and having so many picks. So I have heard some rumblings that the Ravens have been very active, weighing Odafe Owe and weighing, some negotiation trading. I'm not surprised to see the Ravens make a trade for a player or without a player. Now we're seeing Adarius has been extended. I don't know if that was still the same thing for the tender. If someone has a update there with
Ravens also did not tender contracts to restricted FADB Christian Matthews or exclusive rights FA RB Owen Wright. Both are now free agents. Yeah, so I'm looking through. This is just me reading Jeff Zariek's Twitter. So that's a really fun segment. So Jeff says Ravens and Washington had extension talks, but they couldn't agree to deal. Ravens could have put $5.346 million second-round tender on Washington that would have gotten them a second-round pick if Washington signed offer sheet elsewhere, and they didn't match. They opted not to. Also, a few days ago, he had a tweet to some extent. I'm trying to pull that up. That seemed like he might not have been totally happy with what had taken place. Let me see if I can pull that up.
I think he just said bet, which is what he tweeted when he didn't get drafted, something like that.
Yeah. May 1st, 2021, pin tweet, bet. March 9th, bet. March 9th, SOB, all 2025 regardless. Not a full ellipses, 2 periods.
Standing on business. So yeah, in that sense, I guess we can start back at the top there. Ronnie Stanley, like you said, was definitely rumored to have gotten more elsewhere. And we see some prolific deals for Dan Moore to the Titans. You have to think Stanley would have been pushing, $100 million type of contract elsewhere, wanted to stay, wants to be in Baltimore. That's cool. That's fun. That's, old school. Having some loyalty, staying for some tighter dollars. And the Ravens and Ronnie Stanley, I think, have had a really interesting dance to this point over the last going on decade. Highest, we talked about this last time, highest drafted Raven since Jamal Lewis, and was a stud, Hall of Fame trajectory, signs $100 million, the biggest extension, non-quarterback extension or contract in Ravens history. So outside of basically Joe Flacco, biggest extension in contract history, amidst being the top left tackle in football alongside like Trent Williams and maybe a select handful of others, has the injury, takes 2 years to get back, takes a pay cut, tried to come back in 2022 was that, and had to shut it back down, or 2021 had to shut it back down, 2022 struggles, 2023 struggles a bit, tries to get back, 2024 is a great year, looking more like his normal self. He took a pay cut to stay here originally and help the Ravens out really and bet on himself in a sense, and then takes kind of not the maximum amount of money he could have gotten. So I think Ronnie Stanley is a cool player and a cool thing that he has done staying in Baltimore when he had more fruitful financial opportunities elsewhere, such as potentially with Kansas City or New England or Washington.
Yeah, kind of funny looking back on, thinking about him and Orlando Brown and how they could have been sort of a future bookends. Obviously, they were drafted a couple years apart. Ronnie had been there for longer, but Orlando definitely valued his legacy, wanted to be a left tackle. I think the financial opportunities didn't hurt as well for him to move on to KC. He got his ring, having a nice career, and then things kind of went in a different direction for Ronnie when he had gotten hurt that year, which led to Orlando being that, getting that stint at left tackle that I think inspired all of that. But yeah, I mean, just a textbook sort of story on perseverance, really good for him. I mean, God, the extent of that injury with all the nerve damage, you can't imagine what's going through someone's head in the minute something like that happens. And then 2021, obviously that was very weird with him starting out the year and then officially shutting things down after that Raiders game. I think it was just a strange kind of turn of events, several turns of events throughout his career. And then obviously that culminated to him essentially taking that pay cut last year to go out there, prove himself. He did it. He bet on himself and he won here. And it's nice to see him kind of reward the Ravens for their continued faith in him. And just a nice heartwarming story that I think the Ravens really needed after the last couple of months.
Yeah, it was nice. And then just thinking of the offensive line in general, And I guess we can get to DeAndre Hopkins next, the other big ticket item. They were even signing DeAndre Hopkins, who there's been, a lot of NFL coverage of. Feels like the main NFL flagship accounts are putting a lot of traction out there. The tweet of DeAndre Hopkins or Instagram post, whatever it was, of him, Derrick Henry, and Lamar from 2020. How many touchdowns does this trio score? And now all three of them on the same team in Baltimore 5 years later, which who would have thought? Derrick Henry, DeAndre Hopkins 5 years ago. But signing there, and to me, that signing kind of like I just we'll get to him in particular, but I just don't know. There's really not much the Ravens can add on offense at this point. Like, I don't think they're going to acquire another receiver that is beyond DeAndre Hopkins. Like, I don't think they're going to go sign a Cup or.
That was kind of my question is like, what more would you really need with this offense? I think guard obviously stands out as the remaining position of need, but it sounds like, and I think I've seen some people throwing it out there on Twitter that like they wouldn't expect a big investment there. They'd probably want to fill that through the draft. Yeah,
there will be a veteran signed on offense to some position, and I would probably say like tackle would be my guess. But it's not going to be like a starter. I don't think it'll be a high contract player. So you have 11 picks. I think they'll sign an offensive lineman still. Like they have Josh Jones also signed elsewhere, I think, with Seattle. I think, they'll go sign another Josh Jones or John Simpson type player, I would guess. Somebody who's had some success in their career, started some, and is kind of like a backup that maybe can revitalize here. Something like that. So I think this offense is like more or less what you're going to be looking at headed into 2025 opening day. Like, will they draft a first-round receiver? I don't think so. Will they draft a first-round running back? I don't think so. Drafting a running back high, second round, third round, wouldn't surprise me. But, backup quarterback, don't really care. Maybe they draft someone. I think you're just looking at a lot of defensive additions. There was a lot of defensive subtractions in terms of bodies and a couple guys that were expected to be starters. So I would not be remiss to think the Ravens acquire a veteran defensive player right now. And they also put a lot of void years on Ronnie Stanley's contract. Like, a lot of his contract was voided. He has a $5.5 million cap hit this year, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so starting through 2028, 2029, and 2030, they will all be void years. 2025 cap number of $5.8 million.
I believe there's an option on there at some point as well for the club, something like that. So I think you're looking at this offense, man, and it really is like, let's run it back. And we added, DeAndre Hopkins, who's on the back nine of his career. He's probably on, hole number 15, 16, something like that. And he, to me, like him in particular, to sidebar, it's like they wanted Deontay Johnson so that they had a competent veteran in the event that Zay Flowers was injured or Rashad Bateman was injured. And then that happened, but they didn't have a competent veteran because Deontay Johnson didn't want to play football or whatever the fuck was going on. I hope he's all right mentally. He was being a bit of a head case, whatever. Wouldn't go into that Eagles game. So to me, it's like Hopkins was acquired because they want to have a backup starter on the outside. Like, the Ravens love 12 personnel, 21 personnel, 22 personnel. Over half of their snaps are not 11 personnel. So I think they'll draft a receiver. Probably not in the first round. I would say probably not in the second round. You have Tez Walker. Draft two receivers. You have 11 picks. So I think, it's Hopkins is a fail safe. They'll use him a bit. I don't see him getting, 30 snaps a game, but I see him getting 15 snaps a game if everyone's healthy. So I think they really want to turn the page onto the defensive side of the football. They probably want to add another impact pass rusher. They paid Nnamdi Madubuike, to be that impact pass rusher, and wasn't amazing. I said it before last season. I don't think he's going to get 12 sacks again. I don't think he'll get 10 sacks again. He's a good pass rusher. Is he elite? Probably he's a top 10 interior pass rusher or so. But I think you turn to outside linebacker. I think you turn to inside linebacker where Trenton Simpson struggled, and you probably really want to add another safety and another corner. Brandon Stevens gone. Arthur Maulet gone. So you've got Wiggins, you've got Humphrey getting older, playing in the nickel a lot. So I think we see the Ravens acquire a corner or a pass rusher either leading up to the draft or during the draft. I would not be surprised at all to see the Ravens make a splash there. That side of the ball sucked the first half of the season and was an issue. They revamped their entire coaching staff for the most part last year, and then again this year. They kicked out a couple, brought a couple fresh faces in. So I think, DaCosta, Harbaugh, their eyes are on that side of the football right now. I think that's exciting. I think that's fun, and trying to find that identity and maybe that new identity alongside Kyle Hamilton and Nate Wiggins, Roquan Smith, Matabike, some of those guys.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, looking at Hopkins a little bit, just kind of deeper, I mean, his contract, so you mentioned it can get up to $6 million, initially reported as $5 million. I'm kind of curious if that's just the agent number that you tweet out to make everything look good, and then the actual cap number, which I'm not seeing on OTC yet, is a little bit lower than that. So for context, Nelson Aguilar's cap hit last season was $2.135 million. So even if it is $5 million, you're just talking about, two Nelson Aguilars in DeAndre Hopkins as far as price. And I don't know, he's probably not going to have a ton more production, but you'd hope for some more reliability, I suppose. And I think it's to your point, it's just kind of that good sort of stopgap signing where you did need wide receiver depth. You did not want to rely on Tez Walker or rely on another rookie that you grab in like the third or fourth round, because God knows that they're not going to draft another high one. At least I don't know. I wouldn't expect them to anyway, given that they have their 2 first rounders locked up there as their 1 and 2, who I think are good options. So I think this is just kind of a good sort of settle everything down on that offensive side of the ball. Not a ton of needs left after you make that move for Hopkins. And then you're right, it does free you up for the defensive side of the ball, where I think there are much more significant holes. And yeah, man, I wouldn't be surprised if they go into the draft heavily stacking their board in favor of the defensive side, where we mentioned Simpson struggles. I think inside linebacker wouldn't shock me if they grab one in round 2 and everyone's looking around kind of saying WTF, but it's just like they always tend to surprise you with, one of their first 2 picks, I feel like. And I could definitely see it going in that direction. Corner does remain a big need. Wouldn't be surprised to see them. I feel like this has kind of been their move, is to get kind of that veteran corner to provide depth in like July or August, right? I feel like Maulet was that type of guy. Brandon Carr. Ronald Darby. Yeah. Brandon Carr going back several years. Like that's a move that they've made, and it's often worked out pretty well for them. So I feel like they could address that there as well. People getting hot in the pants about some of these safeties in the draft, I could definitely see them try to do that, to pair up one of these young guys with Kyle Hamilton as he approaches his second contract. So just the way things are taking shape, it feels like offense is relatively set. The defensive side of the ball, definitely some more questions over there. And I think one sort of kind of talking point that I've seen thrown around on X is like, who is kind of what is that big splash move for you? I don't know that there necessarily is one. And at this point, it's like, I'm not really sure like if making one would prove to be that difference. Like, it just feels like if you're talking about making moves to try and get over the hump and go win a Super Bowl, none of what I've seen so far would be that. But it's also like, hey, just don't put the ball on the ground in the playoffs next time. Don't like throw dumb interceptions. Don't, drop passes. It's just like, it feels like they're going to have to get out of their own way in the playoffs. And a lot of this, I'm not going to call it window dressing necessarily, but you're just kind of resetting the deck and keeping yourself in that competitive position that you were in.
Exactly. So the other guy, you want to add an impact pass rusher. Like, I think that's what it comes down to. You probably want a veteran, a first or second, third round corner. There's some big, strong corners. The Ravens like big, strong corners. Wiggins was a little bit of an outlier in terms of weight, but he's a tough motherfucker. Trey Amos, Siobhan Ravel, Darian Porter, a little older, Azaria Thomas, Benjamin Morrison, a lot of big, strong press corner types in this draft class. Noel Williams out of Cal, a lot of big, strong press corners. And like you said, going and adding a vet or a later cut would make a ton of sense in that regard. Ardarius Washington, I mean, they need to add to their safety room. I know people love Bo Brady, and maybe he gets into a good spot, but we've got the comment here, cornerback depth is scary, and we know they know that. We know they are going to look at that. They are going to add a lot of at least like average capable bodies. I would think 1 or 2 veterans. Jalen Armour Davis still under contract. When was he drafted? I think this is going to be his final year of his contract.
I believe he was 2021, but I will fact check that.
Yeah. So, I mean, he struggled with injury. I mean, it feels like at this point, this will be his 4th year. Last year of his contract coming up. So,
2022.
Feels like it, he's there. They've trusted him to go in games. I don't know. We'll see in that regard. But I think, yeah, like the Hopkins signing buttons things up. And it's what is Hopkins going to look like in the Ravens offense? To me, it's just someone who knows coverage and has good hands. So I don't think the objective is not going to be, let's get DeAndre Hopkins the football on the run. The objective is going to be DeAndre Hopkins is going to know how to read leverage and sit down in soft spots for Lamar. So he's going to catch the ball static a lot, not be in dynamic running through the catch. That's not going to be his game. He's, still somewhat physical. I forget about TJ Tampa, honestly. Completely forgot about TJ Tampa here. We have in the chat. That's another great option there. So not horrible. Veteran might honestly put him in a good spot. But yeah, Hopkins is just going to be, you hope he's just smart for Lamar. And if you need him, like the cool thing, I'm not super jazzed up. Like, I don't think the Ravens are getting Louque. I think they're getting DeAndre Hopkins. Like, he's 32. He doesn't have juice. He injured his MCL last year. And I think Cole tweeted earlier and was like, he had a hurt MCL last year in camp. So, like optimistic, but it's like, his MCL is not going to get better at 32 with all the wear and tear he has. It's not going to be like, oh, cool, it's healed now. It's going to be like,
he's like an older 32. I think he was young when he came out of Clemson. I mean, he's been in the league for coming up on 12 years now, 2013 draft pick. I mean, it's been a long time.
Right. So he's a great addition to have behind Flowers and Bateman. And it's cool. Like, if you're Rashad Bateman, you've now played with Odell Beckham. You've played with DeAndre Hopkins. Did he play with who else do they have? He had Hollywood. I guess it's like Seth Roberts. Never mind. Or no, Willie Snead. I think he played.
He played with Willie Snead. I mean, that's a really cool kind of thing that he
those two there. So two, superstar receivers a few years ago. It's cool in that regard. C Stackhouse here says, I think Lamar has fared better with homegrown wide receivers. I mean, they're young guys.
They've also invested more in kind of homegrown guys. Like, they haven't gone out and made the splashy that signing. So it's a lot of like this type of move, like stopgap. So I think you're right there, Stackhouse, but I think it's also like they have more talented younger guys. Like, that's kind of been their MO in terms of investing at this position, is investing higher at the younger guys and then filling in the stopgaps with the veterans. So I think a lot of them have been pretty good, but overall it's just more investment. So
yeah, the most they've made is Odell Beckham on that deal. And I mean, I don't know. It's just funny because I was talking about this with Cole last night, but it was like, I was excited about the Odell deal, and I'm not trying to shit on them signing DeAndre Hopkins, but I'm like, okay, whatever. Like, it's a veteran. All right, they got a veteran wide receiver.
The Beckham one actually was kind of more exciting. This is more in line with like what Ozzie used to do, where it's like, oh, this guy that is, and a lot of people were joking about it, like, this is a guy that is 100% past his prime. You really can't argue that. But, he still probably could contribute. To your point, he could be a chain mover. And also, like, not for nothing, he played with Watson when he was still at his peak. And talk about fire drills and kind of getting on a mind meld with a quarterback who can scramble around before the line of scrimmage a little bit, which Lamar is better at that now than he has ever been before. You think about the play against the Texans last year where he's dancing around and fires it to Likely in the end zone. I feel like that's a role that Hopkins could, I wouldn't say exceed in, but he could certainly fill that role fairly well, I would think. And yeah, it's just kind of hoping that he stays healthy and he fits in pretty well. But seems like a guy with a really good attitude. I think back to that Hard Knocks, I think 2015, when he, I forget which Washington corner it was.
It was man, it was a big name corner that was older at the time.
It was. Fuck, who was that?
I fear God, boy.
I fear God, boy. Yeah. Where he like broke his ankles. God, which Washington corner was that?
Oh. I
need to know who that was.
Someone that used to run their mouth like crazy.
Yeah, who was it? Oh, D'Angelo Hall.
Yeah. Couldn't think of his name to save my life. Now a Good Morning Football guy, I think.
Yeah, D Hall. He's fun. I like D Hall. But yeah, that was an awesome clip, and he was really, really cool in that Hard Knocks. He was like probably entering his third season at that point, kind of peak of his powers, and man, just what a beast. And I mean, it kind of, all this really does tie back to the point you love to make, that EDC just always, like, he gets his guys that he was in on at some point. Like, it doesn't matter how far down the road they were, Like 2019, that was all the speculation. Texans were not very good.
They offered the Texans for DeAndre Hopkins 6 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. And of course that falls through. The Ravens were, and that was probably the start of the trend with EDC where it's like the Ravens almost get this guy. But I mean, if you look back on that season, you probably don't get Marcus Peters if that move happened. So I think it worked out okay, but it would have been nice to have D-Hop, as well. Yeah, man, or we can box. Yeah, just what an awesome Hard Knocks season. That was probably one of my favorites, with Ryan Maulet sleeping in and Bill O'Brien just cussing up a storm, and that was a fun one.
Yeah, Bill O'Brien apparently didn't like that DeAndre Hopkins' baby mama was around the facility and was complaining about that.
Good stuff, Bill. That worked out really well for you. Way to have your players' backs.
Yeah, exactly. Gene, we'll get Max Crosby when we're 33. Yeah,
sure.
So or when he's 33. So yeah, I mean, again, it's just like I think
Brian Cushing, Deuce. That was another Brian Cushing, great character that season.
Brian Cushing is one of my all-time favorite sports personalities,
exactly.
And just
I would drink at Starbucks, but it's for chicks.
A lot of fun stuff. But at this point, again, I think it's just kind of let's turn the page, look at this defense, and get this defense into a position to create more havoc via pass rushers and generating more turnovers. That is the key. The Ravens offense was good enough. They scored enough points in playoff games. They scored touchdowns. Could they minimize turnovers? Sure. Was that kind of a weird scenario against the Bills? One dumb interception, unforced, and then that stupid fumble in kind of slippery environment. Yes. But defensively, not forcing enough turnovers in the playoffs, and you need to get more juiced up along your front. And I think that it's just like, I don't know. Long story short is that getting quarterbacks to hold the ball more makes it easier for pass rushers. More quick pressure also makes it easier for DBs. So it's that sweet marriage. And I think we see the Ravens really attack getting maybe a veteran pass rusher. And then, a first round safety would not be shocking. A lot of people like Nick Emmanwori to the Ravens. Malachi Starks has gotten a ton of traction when you go read all these mock drafts, things like that. I think if Jahad Campbell fell a bit from Alabama, I could see them loving that. I don't know that he'll make it that far. Is probably, you can call Jalen Walker what you want to call him. He's off-ball linebacker and or edge rusher, but true off-ball linebacker, Jahad Campbell probably the number one in the draft. So, it's interesting. And I do think the interesting thing about DeAndre Hopkins too, to I guess belabor it a little and dip back and forth, but the Ravens have been so predicated on creating separation and throwing to open receivers in Todd Monken's offense. And that's not DeAndre Hopkins' game. Like I saw ESPN said he had the 25th open score or something, but he's a contested catch guy. He has freaking 11-inch hands and 5XL gloves. That's always been his game. He was a little more of a separator back in the day, but again, I think it's just being a tough, reliable target on the outside that knows where to be, and not something Lamar's really had, right? Like that kind of possession receiver on the outside specifically that has done it at a high level. So we shall see. But I think it's really just them doing everything they can to turn all of their attention to having more impact playmakers on defense through the draft and maybe through a trade.
Absolutely. And pulling it up now, we have Brian McFarland breaking all this stuff down. And he's got the Ravens as of 3/12/25 today at 4 p.m. $6.06 million in cap space. And then he's got full sort of usable list here. Or I should say full list here of projected effective usable salary cap space with some potential moves to create space. So extensions for guys like Derrick Henry, Lamar, restructure for Lamar, restructure for Humphrey, extension for Humphrey, release trade, or extension of Andrews, Roquan restructure, Matabike restructure, Oweh extension, Bateman restructure, Justin Tucker post-June 1 release. If any or all of those take place in a certain form or fashion, you're looking at $20.9 million in effective usable space. So a lot to go before we get to that point, but that is how things look as of right now.
Yeah, so they can create as much room as they want And again, I look at that Ronnie Stanley contract. There's something they want this year. They want room for something. And that could even be, again, when does Eric DeCosta like to do his bargain shopping? At the trade deadline. Marcus Peters, Yannick Ngakoue, Roquan Smith in DeCosta's stewardship of this front office, all acquired at the deadline. So having enough flexibility to make a move when and if they want to. So I think they're hitting the phones hard right now. I don't know who they're looking at exactly. I mean, the one that I can speculate on purely is Micah Parsons. I don't know what. I mean, we always love our Jerry world. When you go look at the list of moves they've made, it is hysterical. I wonder if I can find it. It's trading for Kenneth Murray. They signed Peyton Turner, who didn't really pan out in New Orleans.
The tweet that goes around, somebody tagged him when they announced that signing as a former first rounder, and like somebody put up that old tweet of like, when somebody's a former first rounder, that means they're dog shit. No offense, Peyton Turner.
Cowboys traded for Kenneth Murray, traded for Kyer Elam, signed Javonte Williams, signed Solomon Thomas, Peyton Turner, Jack Sanborn, and Robert Jones. Those first 5 names: Kenneth Murray, former first rounder; Kyer Elam, former first rounder; Solomon Thomas, former first rounder; Peyton Turner, former first rounder. So just a bunch of former first rounders that they hope can, just turn the corner. I guess that's the big plan in Jerry world. I know that a lot of Cowboys fans want them to sign Cooper Kupp, but those moves to me like scream. DeMarcus Lawrence left. They just scream like, I need to completely revamp this entire roster, but I have a high-paid quarterback. I'm not trading him, and I don't know what to do.
It's interesting.
So I don't know. Michael Parsons, the one that I'll sniff around and see. So yeah, Chase Young, $51 million contract, first round. And that's really so funny that it's still so true. Michael Mulgrave, the first round draft capital holds so much weight. It really, truly, thoroughly does. It's insane how much weight it holds. And the other aspect I think of too, like, I think being a first round draft pick makes you so disgruntled when you don't get top of market in like extension offers. Like Patrick Queen is an example. I feel like the rumblings were that he wanted a lot of money very quickly early on. Odafe Owe, like, I don't know, he's been tweeting cryptic shit. He easily could have been, like, if you're the 35th pick, I really think you have a different mindset. Like, I think the first round pick thing puts you into a different mindset. And if you're able to become a starter, it really makes you not nearly as agreeable when you're like, maybe not that great, but
you get a lot more money up front and you get that 5th year option, which is a lot more money on the back end of that first contract. So yeah, it's you can understand why that would put you in a different mindset. I mean, like, these pre-draft narratives, draft narratives and pre-draft narratives follow you your entire career. You know what I was thinking about the other day? Like, I know Lamar was a polarizing prospect already, but like, what if Bill Polian had just never made those comments about him moving to wide receiver? I feel like the conversation around him would be like at least like 30% less toxic. And I know at this point, he's kind of ascended past that. People generally are on board with him as a top 4 quarterback.
The final frontier was like Steelers fans, and he fucking whipped their ass twice.
Yeah. I mean,
so yeah, I think those are all put to bed now, but
it only took 8 years for a, several time all pro, Pro Bowler every year he's healthy type player to finally get past that.
Right. Second all time in passer rating per season. So yeah, man, I think again, like, the offensive line last year was such a big shifting thing. The Ravens lost Zeitler. They lost John Simpson. They lost Morgan Moses. It ended up with them drafting and then also trying to develop Falele, develop Voorhees over the offseason. Joe D'Alessandro unfortunately passed away. And then you had to go find a new offensive line coach. And then you were like trying to rotate Rosengarten in at right tackle and get him integrated. Like, so much energy and resources, meaning time and attention. Like, you only have so much attention that you can possibly pay to your football team or to anything in life. And a lot of it was going to the offensive line. I think that is why re-signing Ronnie Stanley was not an option. Like, it had to be done. And Now you're like, all right, well, we have tackles and we have a good center. And Falele's fine. Like, he can start and it's okay. He's fine. And then Voorhees, like, you're like, all right, cool. Like, we know that dude. He didn't get to play a ton, but we know that dude. So adding an athletic guard, I think, would be sick at right tackle, or excuse me, at right guard, where you can have someone that gets to the second level, that you can get out on screens, someone that can kind of be like Linderbaum, that can also get the fuck out of the mess and go attack a linebacker and pick them up and cut them off. I think that's a big key for the playoffs in Monken's offense. We saw the Bills like have smarter linebackers that are able to, I mean, the Ravens had an okay day running the ball. They didn't run all over the Bills, but the linebackers are better and the defensive linemen are better and the safeties are better. That's like what's going on in football right now. The spines of defenses are better and smarter and resources are getting spent there. So you need a guard that can release and go cut linebackers off and not let them be free to mirror the running back, or that can enable Linderbaum to go do that. So that, I think, is a mission. There's a great draft class for that. There are 10 guys in this class that fit that kind of athletic profile at right guard, but that's really the last frontier on offense. And then, I mean, like you said, Jake, got to force more turnovers in the playoffs, can't turn the football over. I think they're special teams wise. I mean, the Ravens don't have Tylan Wallace. They don't have Chris Board. They don't have Malik Harrison. They're going to draft. My prediction will be this. They're going to draft. If they pick 11 times, I'm not surprised at all, because the last time they did that, I was like, there's no way they're going to pick 11 times. That would be insane. You're either trading for future picks or you're acquiring a player or you're trading up in the draft. No, they fucking did it, which is crazy, but it's how they find value in these, 4-year controlled cost contracts you have. 7 of those picks will be on the defensive side of the football. Like the whole kicker thing, maybe they draft a kicker, sure, we'll see. But I still think 7 of those dudes are going to be on the defensive side. I think we're going to see linebackers and safeties galore. They need special teams players. I think day 3, they're going to draft 4+ defensive players because they need special teams bodies bad.
Yeah, and it is like, it's an extreme strategy to a certain extent, but I mean, like, that's how when you pick 5 times in the 4th round and like you get an Isaiah Likely and a Charlie Kolar in 1 round, Likely a really good player, I think, with Pro Bowl potential, and Kolar a very useful player and just growing more and more as the years, go on. That's how you manage to do that type of thing. And I mean, I don't know. I certainly do think they'll have the special teams kind of prowess in mind. That's sort of what you'd hope John Harbaugh is there for, so he can just kind of develop guys into those roles. But I mean, it's part of the way that they do things. And ultimately, I think last year, as much as it sucked that they lost the way that they did, it's just another data point that, like, yeah, like the talent is there. Lamar is as good as he's ever been. That's pretty much all you need to be able to win a Super Bowl. You've just got to stop shooting yourself in the foot like they did. And unfortunately, I don't know really what the fix is for that. We might be back here having the same conversation next year. And at that point, I think you do have to probably, I think it's kind of shit or get off the pot time for Harbaugh, or if not going into this year, you have that mindset. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting.
Right. And that's the bigger conversation to be had probably later. But yeah, man, they need to cause more havoc defensively. It was a shame because in 2023, they had a defense that did and still weren't really able to do it in the playoffs. And in 2024, they didn't, and they got the defense to be safe and capable, but not disruptive. So, I mean, does the offense need to do a better job in playoff games? Taking care of the football, yes, but 2, I think, forced turnovers in their last 6 playoff games combined, maybe something like that. And one of those was a big Kyle Hamilton forced fumble when Lamar wasn't playing against the Bengals. It was that fucking smack he had on Hayden Hurst, one of my favorite hits of modern Ravens history, the last 10 years of the Ravens. One of my favorite plays. Love it. But more havoc, more turnovers. If your offense turns the football over, you need your defense to be able to get sacks and force fumbles and be opportunistic and create chaos leads to turnovers. So chaos, that is the remaining theme of the offseason for the Ravens. More defensive chaos, more disruption via, playmakers on the back end or pass rushers. So that's the challenge. I think Zach Orr pretty much exactly said that in Indy. I think that's exactly what he said. I think he said his entire focus is creating turnovers. That's what they need to be better at. And when you have an offense that's so efficient, even if they do turn the football over once or twice. Ravens still scored mid-20s. They would have scored 27 or whatever to tie the game, even with those bad turnovers. So it doesn't even matter if their offense turns the ball over. They need to get off the field and take the football away in playoff games. That's it. So that's why it's like
a huge part of their wins down the stretch. I mean, the pick six by Marlon against the Steelers, that wins you the game. I mean, Nate Wiggins pick six against the Browns. You're probably winning that game anyway. I get it. But Marlon was creating splash plays all year, and that was kind of the epitome of it. Really the only bright spot throughout the entire season. And, that was a big part of how they made their hay. And then, you look at some of their bad losses. Kyle Hamilton has his hands on the ball of a Jameis Winston pass that probably would have iced that, Browns game, that first one. And you're probably at a different seat.
Him and Eddie Jackson combined for 11 dropped interceptions that game.
Yeah, you might be playing at home for another round if you win that game. You never know. It's just consistently in that regard. It's obviously defense as a whole is not as predictive as offense, obviously, and certainly not the chaos that you're mentioning and the turnovers. You can't predict it. It's not a thing that you can really spreadsheet or data boy your way into, but your approach needs to be focused around that and just try your damn best to make it a priority, because I think that was the missing piece for them last season.
Definitely. And I don't know, there's several ways to go about allocating the resources you have. One of those to me is drafting a linebacker and a safety. One of those is trading for a premier pass rusher. I don't think rookies, it's hard to think a rookie pass rusher at 27 and later or whatever their pick is. Is it the same both years in a row? Or I'm going to keep saying that wrong because Wiggins was 27. Do they have the exact same pick? No, because they were in the conference championship. Yeah. I don't know what their pick is. Whatever, late 20s. And I don't think a pass rusher you draft there is going to come in and be a really a force to be reckoned with as a pass rusher in year one. I just don't. It's rare. So to me, acquire a veteran, draft a safety high if you like one, draft a corner high if you like one. Coverage on the back end. You see guys make a big impact as rookie safeties, and again, that's where I think it's interesting. And some people draft a guard in the first round. Looks like they're not even going to fucking start him. They won't start Rosengarten. They needed to start and didn't for a month. Maybe a guard comes in and starts a month down the road, but I don't know. You can't count on a rookie to come in and at the end of the first round be the difference maker for you. Cooper DeJean was sick for the Eagles, but they also had a nasty ass pass rush that was unstoppable, and that probably enabled him to be sick. And then Kenyon Mitchell drafted much higher. So yeah, it's an interesting exercise in how do we get impact now on the field early and that you can count on versus long-term building. And I don't know, all eyes on defense, man. That's pretty much it at this point.
Yeah. And I guess we'll see if they are kind of willing to push the chips in, because it's a conversation we've been having for 6-7 years at this point. And they've kind of, I think admirably done the smart thing and kept their chips kind of closer to the vest in some ways while still fielding a roster that's able to win playoff games. But eventually, are you going to try and make that splash move, get a Micah Parsons, get a Jair Alexander? That might be a weird personality fit based upon some of the stuff that's gone down in Green Bay. But I don't know, man. It seems like, I don't know, man, not to take this down too dark of a road, but the zero tolerance policy, I think that's proven itself to be a bit of I wouldn't call it totally a sham, but it doesn't seem like it was ironclad as they were kind of making it out to be. So are you kind of willing to take character risks? Are you going to kind of maybe widen that scope a little bit and do sort of the Howie Roseman thing where it's let's just draft all the guys that everybody on Twitter says are good, and sign guys like that. And another thing the Eagles, that you could look at, you sign a Zach Bond. Turns out to be a great player for you. Can you find that guy that can give you that type of edge? The Ravens have done well to do that with guys like Van Noy, and Clowney was a 1-year rental, but he wound up being very good for them. Can you just keep finding that value and then also find a way to maybe sort of go all in, go for broke, and find the guy that can, obviously I said it's not a guarantee to put yourself over the hump, but find a way to make that happen. I guess we're still in wait and see mode, but after this first wave of free agency, I think they've put themselves on a pretty solid spot.
Well said. Keeping things calm. You always like to see your team be the one that's not shelling out 50, 60, 80, $100 million contracts in free agency, because that means you failed and you're desperate and you have a lot of cap space because you don't have a lot of good players under contract. Or you have a rookie quarterback, like in the case of the Commanders, who have been able to, trade for Laramie Tunsil and Deebo Samuel and shit. So, like to see it. Yeah. Chase Young off of Aura, generational wealth.
Yeah, for our podcast listeners, it's a X post. Shefty reporting Chase Young signing with the Saints on a 3-year, $51 million deal worth up to $57 million. Quote tweeted by @905car. First person to attain generational wealth purely off Aura? ? Yeah, that first rounder thing, top 5 pick thing, that will follow you your entire career and it will make you a lot of money.
Exactly. So I think that's pretty much all I've got at this point in time, but we'll see. I imagine the Ravens add another similar player like DeAndre Hopkins, another past their prime veteran who can still play some football for you along the offensive line and or maybe in the secondary. And yeah, I think they're, like you said, when do you push some chips in? It's about that time, really about that time. If you're just going to try to run it back, again, so I've said it this whole time, add one more impact veteran player, like impact star veteran player on either side of the football. I honestly don't even care if it was a wide receiver or whatever. I think they are one star player away from having such a good roster. But then I come back and I'm like, well, they've had good rosters. It's just at the end of the day, you got to win fucking 4 games in a row, play clean football for the most part, and figure out how to outlast teams in the playoffs. And that's the beauty of the single game elimination tournament. That's why Bloodsport was sick. You win the fight or you die, right? Even if you got a little sand in your eye.
Little Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. One man enters, one man leaves.
Yep. So that's the conundrum Ravens fans are in. Regular season, you can only be disappointed because when they win, you're like, cool. We've got years worth of Lamar highlights. We've seen it. He still stuns you. We've pretty much seen it all, though. Like, then he goes and stiff arm Stam Hubbard.
Yeah, you say that, and then he's like, pulling the Steph Curry like multiple times a year, and he's stiff arming Sam Hubbard, and he's just like, you keep thinking. He's like, it's kind of like the Russ Cole talking to Marty Hart in True Detective. You were like, every time I think you hit a ceiling, you just keep raising the bar. You're like the Michael Jordan of being a son of a bitch. Lamar is like the Michael Jordan of just blowing your mind, like just keeps raising the bar.
Yep. So, it's like those are fun and cool and winning's fun. And I always tell people don't take that for granted, but I understand being a little numb to regular season success. It's like I can only be pissed off when they lose to the Browns and Raiders because I expect them to win pretty much every game they play against anyone other than like 1 or 2 teams. And then in the playoffs, then that's when you're really waiting for it to start. So I get it. And I think that's why at this point, like, you can run it back, but why not trade that first round pick for something? We'll see. I want to like mark this one down. We've been doing this podcast for 6 years now. I want to mark down who they drafted in, and it's not like you never know what trades are possible. Trade this first round pick for an impact player if it's possible. I implore you, Mr. DaCosta. Like, I implore you to. Let's mark this down. Let's see who they drafted and pick whatever the hell they have, and let's look at it at the end of their rookie contract. I don't love who you could be like when I'm doing the mock drafts and stuff. I don't know. I'm just an idiot, but I'm like, I don't like any of these. They're all fine. Okay. Last year I didn't feel that. Like, I very rarely feel that way. Now I'm like, fuck this. If you can trade, do it. But other teams might feel the same way. Other teams might be in the same boat, so it might be a buyer's market. So
the calculus is just totally different at the bottom of the first round too. Like, I'm sure all these teams that are picking in the top 10 are fired up, but when you do this several years in a row, it kind of just becomes all right. Like, we get it, but we're kind of hoping for a little bit more in the postseason.
Travis Hunter.
Yeah. I mean, that would be
like to 5, like something like that.
He starts sliding. I mean, like, it didn't win Atlanta Super Bowl, but they went all in and they got a Julio Jones, right? Like, there is a precedent for that type of thing happening. And like, if they were out of position in 2022, like, let's say they were picking like 25th and Kyle Hamilton had fallen to 14th, I'm telling you right now, they probably would have jumped right up there and gotten his ass. So I mean, if it does start to happen with a Travis Hunter, I think you really got to keep that in mind. Jets have touched Jay Mosley. There's your middle linebacker to pair up with Uncle Rowe.
He's an old man now. Old man. I don't know. I don't know who else I would consider trading up for. Like,
that would be massive for the local economy, though. All those Fed Hill restaurants and bars. I mean,
Wayward's revenue would go back to pre-COVID revenue.
Yeah, Roblox, arcade that they put in. I feel like that would finally start to return some dividends.
Yeah. So that's about all I've got. Draft coming up. We'll get like maybe a big fat draft episode, and we'll see what we do for the draft itself. But yeah, I think the Ravens are in a calm place relatively after some tumultuous, stupid offseason shit going on for a while. And yeah, Ronnie Stanley, DeAndre Hopkins, Pat Ricard, run it back, acquire a star, generate some turnovers, go and try and win the damn trophy.
Absolutely. All right, my friend. That all you got?
That's all we got.
All right. Well, thank you guys for tuning in to this tight, almost hour episode of the Jumbo Set Podcast, where we break down the first wave of arrivals and departures in the 2025 free agency class. A lot to get into today. I think it was a fun episode. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to us here on YouTube or tell a friend to do so as we approach that 3K mark. We've been waiting to hit it. So anything you can do to help us achieve that, tell a friend via word of mouth. Tell them on social media. You can find us at Exit52 Podcast on X and on Instagram. I am at Jake Louque. That's Louque. Spenny at Ravens4Dummies. That is the number 4. Brian at Barstool Banks. Taylor at Taylor Smythe 10. Eric at EDITTI 22. If you're an Orioles fan getting pumped up about that, feel free to tune into the episode that we posted yesterday where we broke down some spring training stuff and went through Eric's trip down to Sarasota. If you've been thinking about making a spring training trip, it's a good little guide for you to dive into at the end of the episode there as he gets into all his shenanigans down there in Sarasota. So check that out. Thank you to all our presenting sponsors: Jimmy's Famous Seafood, Black Eyed Susan Spices, Fed Thrill Sunglasses, Clipper City Barber Co., everyone that we've got in the mix. We appreciate you all. And until next time, we will talk to you again very, very soon.
See ya.
Arrivederci.
Really, really hard, and they execute the system, and that's what it's all about.
Yes, sir. Trust. He's pretty big trust.
Big trust, baby.
Hey, yes, sir. Right on cue. Hey, let me.